Hello and welcome to Think Fast, where I have come in a somber mood because it's a Saturday. I'm relaxing. What's happening?
What's going on? Why do you have a new accent every time we talk?
I'm trying to become a voice artist. I will become eventually a person who will do multiple characters in an audio drama by myself.
Amazing.
I will, yes,
Amazing.
that is my
Please
future.
rent out those services on OnlyFans along with all the other services you rent out on OnlyFans. Varun Suchita.
I was talking to someone yesterday about how there was this point of time in Clubhouse where people would go onto whale moaning channels and everybody would moan like whales. I don't know if you ever went onto
What?
that. Yeah, there was a whale
No.
moaning channel on Clubhouse. In the early days when Clubhouse was a thing, it supposedly still is, although I don't know who goes there anymore. But people would go into this channel. It's a whale moaning channel where you would go and they would all moan like whales. I did
That
not
is,
moan. I went in and listened for some time and I left.
oh, good Lord. How do you find this stupid shit on the internet,
All the
Varun?
time. The internet is amazing.
Seriously.
The
Oh
internet is
my
amazing for
God.
this.
Especially if you're having a midlife crisis, as we can tell.
Yes.
But
Yes.
what's been happening with you, man? How's the week been? Quiet,
The
slow,
week's been
layoffs
good.
continue?
Yeah, it's not like a super news filled week.
Hmm.
Obviously, sadly had another death, which I think was just super sad,
Man, I was so upset. How
which is
did he die?
KK.
How did he die?
So it's, I mean, if you, I spoke to a bunch of people from the music industry, and a lot of them said, obviously there's a lot of blame going towards the venue. The air
Hmm.
conditioning wasn't working properly. Supposedly, there were way more people than it's supposed to hold. Indoor stadium with like air conditioning kind of failing, but he did a long concert, came out, was exhausted, had a heart attack. So everyone's kind of talking about how conditions are really bad for artists, etc. But a lot of people also kind of turned around and said is the fact that um, he seemed fine when he kind of came off, but I guess exhaustion at some point caught on. But it's sad. At
Hmm.
the end of the day, like seriously, one of the best artists we've had in the
Yeah.
industry for so long.
What's your
I can't think
favorite
of
KK
one bad
song?
song. I don't want to go cliche and say Yaro, but Aapki Dua.
Oh my God, same
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
It's my favorite song of all time.
What a
Do you know
song.
the girl
Right.
who's in the song used to be in my school?
Yeah.
She, yeah, tragically passed away when she was in class 12, I remember. I'm forgetting her name, Pooja something. But she was like, like everyone thought she'd be like the superstar because she was absolutely stunning. And obviously, she had this, big breakthrough in KK's Aapki Dua video.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that was awfully sad.
Yeah, it's been like, I mean, I was at a conference which had a lot of people from the music industry, and they said literally like they're like, we've had two people pass away in the last like what, a couple of weeks,
Hmm.
both obviously different sides of the spectrum, but really good strong
Who is
artists
the
kind of.
first one?
Sidhu Moosewala.
Oh, yes. I mean, he was shot dead, assassinated.
Yeah,
He didn't
yeah, but
just pass away.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah, that was.
it's been a weird time for the industry in that sense. But talking to the other industries, what's been happening in the world of
Okay, one second.
business?
How have you, dude? Business we'll get to in just one bit, but while we're talking about all things like strange and absurd that have
Hmm.
happened over the past 2 weeks, Johnny Depp, Amber Heard, how much of your life has been lost on this case? Please tell me.
So here's the thing, right? And I've tried to walk on that line of saying, because I know there are a lot of, I mean, people I know, friends, etc., have also said, okay, you can't be a consumer of the memes, you can't be seeing what's happening. At some level, I find it really bizarre whenever this kind of stuff is put out in the public. I mean, in my head, these are cases which should generally be fought behind closed doors, but this is almost a case that was fought in public. Um,
Hmm.
End of the day, one of the best things I actually saw was today morning. I think Amber Heard's lawyer was on a talk show in the States, and one of the people there is an ex NFL guy who's part of that morning
Yeah,
show,
yeah,
and
yeah.
she was
I
saying
saw
that the
this.
other side did this, and he's like, I've been a sports person for so long. It's very easy to turn to the other side and point a finger. What you need to do is look in the mirror, which I think was a very like, I mean, hard thing to say, but
Yeah.
it's true. You lost. What people don't seem to have gotten the nuance of is this wasn't a case to around domestic violence. It's actually a case about defamation.
Yeah.
They both got fined if you look at it closely. But yeah, it's just been this pop culture fest meets some really dark stuff being trivialized. I've been very conflicted about how to feel about it, but I have consumed it. In
Yeah.
all honesty, so yeah, that's the whole Amber Johnny Depp thing. I mean, for me, it's like, yeah, it's so bizarre.
Yeah, but I mean, for people like complaining about, oh my God, he won because of, all the support that he got, and, or, all of those sort of memes about, Amber Turd and this, that, and the other. I think the thing that people forget is this is just how the internet works. And the
Yeah.
same people who, the irony of the situation is the same people who are talking about how, the internet worked against Amber Heard in this
Mm.
case, where they amplified something that perhaps should have happened behind closed doors. I mean, to each of you guys who has done this, think about the last time you spoke out of context without any facts, and
Yeah.
called someone else out without really knowing what was happening within their context. It's just the hypocrisy of it all I find nauseating, because irrespective of quote unquote whose side, honestly I just watched it because I just thought it was a masterclass in how cases are won and lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it was literally just a masterclass in like the legal
Really
profession.
good
So
legal team, really bad legal team. I mean, that's a case study of that. Like, just like how not to do it and how to do it. I
yeah,
agree.
yeah. But getting back to the world of business, this week's had a couple of like big pieces of news. I think one, of course, which we're going to talk about in just a bit, is Sheryl Sandberg has
Yeah.
finally decided to hang her coat, or whatever the muhavra is, and
Mm.
she is moving out of Meta as the
Yeah.
COO. This was long time coming, but we're going to talk about this in a bit. In lighter, brighter news, Sugar Cosmetics, definitely one of my favorite brands, has raised a $50 million round led by El Cateron, which is, they basically invest a lot of the LVMH
Okay.
family money. So massive news. And I think, we guys have obviously discussed this a bunch of times. And while there is room for all, I really like how Sugar Cosmetics has built their business up compared to a lot of their counterparts. Any
Yeah.
two cents
Very
on Sugar
offline
Cosmetics
focused,
from you?
right? Yeah.
Very offline focused, very first principles,
Mm.
a very strong understanding of how customers operate. And also, what I really like about them is they haven't fallen into, and I, don't say this mildly, the trap of like house of brands. I
Mm.
think what they have clearly shown is, first and foremost, we're going to show success with one brand,
Mm.
and then use parts of that success to maybe, you never know, like in the future, diversify their bets, perhaps even
Yeah.
get acquired by the LVMHs or like the Estee Lauders or whatever of the world. But what I love about their business is they haven't fallen into this rubbish of like, we want to build house of brands without even having one product in our catalog actually performing really well. And I
Yeah.
generally really like the founders, man. There's something very like nice and
Likable,
relatable.
focused, and like they seem balanced. They don't seem erratic. I mean, considering she was also on Shark Tank and she was
Yeah.
totally like, she held her own. I think that kind of shows as well. Speaking of holding your own, are you a white noise listener? Uh,
Oh, this piece of news was insane. What are we doing with our lives, man? What are we
yes,
doing with
but
our
there's
lives?
this entire article about how Spotify podcasters are making $18,000 a month with nothing but white noise as a podcast. If you think about it, and I'm weirdly referencing Clubhouse way too much today. That's also what used to get. You should have lo-fi music, white noise as channels, and people just listen to it all day long. Great way to put babies and kids to sleep. By the way, white noise. Play white noise in the background. Actually, you will sleep like a baby if you play white noise in the background.
I'm gonna try
So
that out
I
today.
can understand why this is a thing, but
Yeah.
$18,000 a month. This is the new business model, IBM. No longer us yapping away, just play white noise.
Absolutely. Think Fast, new edition. But other good news, dude. Blue Tokai opened up in Japan, which is
Yeah,
incredible. It makes me so
so cool.
happy to see Indian brands get out of just the confines of, our borders. There's, of course, Napa Dori, which opened a store in London and in Dubai.
Yeah,
And, you've got Blue Tokai now sort of like gadoing the Desi coffee jhanda in Japan, which is pretty fucking awesome, man. Congratulations, Blue Tokai. You deserve it.
Yes, yes, yes. Also, like, if you think of them, they're one of the first brands that really broke out from the coffee
OG.
space.
Yeah,
OGs,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I still remember, I still do order some of their coffees on and off, and it's just been a very smart growth plan for them. They haven't tried any stunts. They haven't done anything random with coffee. They just stuck to the basics and kind of grew from there. And on the other front, what else is happening? What else is happening? Okay, I can't not talk about this. There is this horrendous series of ads for this perfume brand called Shots,
Hmm.
which actually aren't online. They only played on TV during, I think, the England New Zealand Test series, and it is by far one of the I think one of the worst pieces of advertising I've seen, because it is so wrong in every single way.
Hmm.
In a nutshell, it characterizes a bunch of guys looking at a girl in a supermarket and saying, "Short कौन लेगा? हम चार है और बस ये एक." And then she turns around almost like with a what the fuck, and then there's a perfume bottle next to her, and this guy goes and takes shot to banta hai. Similarly, there's another one where there's a guy and a girl in a bedroom, and they're just sitting on the bed, and these four guys walk in and saying up shot con le, something like that, like who's going to take a shot, and they again pick up a perfume bottle on the side of the table. So it's insinuating gang rape as a joke, which is, I mean, I
Yeah,
don't even know how to react to.
it was disgusting. It was so badly thought out, like badly executed. Who is this dumbass founder who has let, or CEO or whoever, who has let this ad go? In fact, I just heard about it before we started recording, and I saw bits and pieces of it online. But just like preposterously, this isn't even like an oversight. This isn't like Dunzo's ad where they blatantly copied Coinbase,
Yeah.
and like then had to release an oops. This is like a, what have you, like, what the fuck is this shit?
And how does this get onto television? Like,
Yeah,
I understand digital sometimes, if it's then you can speak to the brand alone. But here
yeah,
it's gone through the league, whatever the team at the channel. It's come on television. It's getting called out all over the place. ASCII kind of has put out a post asking to take it off, and they say they sending them a notice for that as well.
yeah.
But I mean, come on, guys. Like, it's I won't even call it lazy advertising. It is just the worst kind of advertising, and that's not what we really need. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's so
I want to
like,
switch gears. Yes, let's, and good on you, Varun, for doing the right thing and calling out whatever this crappy perfume company is. Please don't buy their perfumes, guys. This is
short mat lena.
disgusting. Yes, please, Matlo. But just one last thing, and then we can get on to the meat of our episode. But there's this really good, thread sort of posted on interesting insights from Zomato's Q4
Hmm.
FY 2022 report. So just a couple of things that I wanted to call out to. Their average monthly transacting users is about 15.7 million. One really interesting fact, and obviously, you can catch the rest on this thread. The thread is by this lady called Aditi Kothari. But just one, big piece of like, I knew it, and there we go again. Is so Zomato's gross order value is about 5,800 crores.
Hmm.
The top eight cities contribute to 60% of their gross order value.
Oh
And the
wow.
top 300 contribute to about 99%. Top eight cities. And this goes back to the conversation that we had on the last episode as well, which is, dude, you can say whatever you want about tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 India and build for Bharat and all of that.
Yeah.
But if you really want to make money, you know where to get money out of.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the average order value has gone up by a rupee in the last financial year. So it's gone up from 397 to 398 rupees. So again, evidently just based on that average order value, you can see why they're still loss making. But one really interesting data point that I found was exactly this, right? This 60, can you imagine? Isn't that absurd? 60% of
Yeah.
your GOV is coming from the top eight cities. That is wild.
And also then talks about what is the business model in terms of, like, do you need to scale then? Do you double down on what you already have in the cities
Yeah.
versus just trying to spread wider, because the wider doesn't seem to be adding more to to bottom line.
But you're seeing more information come out about this, right? So apparently,
Mm,
Swiggy is looking at going into categories outside of just food delivery. I don't know if you saw this, but
I haven't seen.
I saw some murmurings on Twitter. I think there's an article also either in the Economic Times or one of these larger publications where Swiggy is looking at getting into other categories. They're trying to target, D2C slash independent brands. Swiggy, if you're listening to this, do not do that. And in case you're attempting this, you're more than welcome to reach out to us, and we can give you a guidebook on, how to think about small independent brands. But I just like it's just I find it like fascinating. And it was funny when I was reading that you kind of juxtapose it to things that Google Pay, Phone Pay, and
Mm,
Paytm have tried. So Paytm had this thing called Minis, where where independent brands could have mini apps within the Paytm app.
yeah.
Google Pay did the same thing. Phone Pay did the same thing. How do we know? Because we were their partners on all of this. We being LBB, all of them have either sunsetted those projects or have like massively deprioritized them, because dealing with this like behemoth of businesses in India is a whatever.
Mm,
This would make for another episode. But to your point, it's interesting to see how these guys are like now trying to grasp into other categories or like other business lines to make that AOV slightly more chunkier.
yeah, for sure. Uh, I realize this is a very long introduction. We have gone in, including the. I'm still like so pissed off about the ad. Sorry, so I'm going to sound like this person for a bit till we come back from the break. But before we go for the break, what are we talking about today? Obviously, you mentioned earlier we're going to talk about Sheryl Sandberg leaving. Some stuff around how Dream 11 is kind of building their business on the cap front. Ola, which for some reason you can never have a positive Ola news, but you're going to talk about Ola because there's always something going off there lately. You're digging into urban company,
Yep.
and the
Country delight.
country delights, doodh wala business, my favorite.
Yes. The
Um,
best.
yes, so we're going to dig into all of that and a few other things, and I will come back in a slightly more chirpy mood right after this break.
Hello, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcasts Network. On The Habit Coach, Dr. Richa and Ashton talk about the ill effects of cigarettes, vapes, and hookahs. On Misconduct, Raghavi and Nisha introduce us to Sarlaben, the woman who led the Chipko movement. On Naan Curry, Sadaf and Archit talk about the tearjerker of all vegetables, onions. On Pulyabazi, Pranay and Saurabh analyze whether Indian states should engage in economic diplomacy. And on Ek Chuski Finance, Priyanka tells us all there is to know about KYC. We've got some exciting news for you. IVM Podcasts has just launched its merch, and our first line is out now. Head to the IVM Podcasts website and click on the Shop tab to check out our first collection of t-shirts. Do follow us on social media. We are IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. Also, don't forget to rate us on any platform you're listening on. And you can also check us out on YouTube. We're also doing a small listener survey to better understand how you respond to our shows and advertising on the network. We would really appreciate it if you could spare a few minutes to fill it out. It helps us build better shows for you. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week: SBI Life Insurance, Jupiter, a digital banking app, Cap Gemini, get the future you want, Intel V Pro, built for business, and Intel, future banao wonderful with Intel powered laptops.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where I am back in a happy mood, but also I think there's someone else who's got a happy mood, which is Sheryl Sandberg. She's like, Tata, okay, mate, chali. I'm going to do other shit in my life. I've been doing this for too long. But
14 years. Wow.
14 years, yeah, it's a
I
long time.
know. Indian engineers learn something. But
It's
in
really
any
funny.
case,
She spent 14 years at Facebook. I have spent 13 years at Glitch. Not a comparison. I just realized that I've been at Glitch also for
are
very
you
long.
signaling something, Varun? Are
I'm
you
not signaling
signaling
anything.
something?
I am not signaling anything.
Broken on. Think fast first.
Yes, that Varun thinks he's Sheryl Sandberg, but no, I do not think I'm Sheryl Sandberg in any context of the word. I
You
don't know if
have a
that's what you meant.
personality though, mildly
I do have.
narcissistic.
Yes, that is true. I also have this like nice
Written a
like
book, getting on
written a
to the
book.
next one.
Yes,
Sorry, getting
I
back to the
talk
Sheryl
like a
Sandberg
philosopher.
story.
I talk like a philosopher. So does she. But I mean, let's take a step back and just think about her journey, right? Obviously, she came in from Google to Facebook. Many people at that time thought it was a bad move for her, saying, "Why would you do
Hmm.
that?" But all the problems aside, you have to give her credit where it's due for really having built that business model, because in many ways she built that business. I mean, Mark Zuckerberg being the genius that he is, you can't take that away from him. But the actual core business, them building that advertising, focused business, really scale that up for a social media giant. It's largely been her.
Whoops, sorry, I was on mute there. I was going to say 100%, and also, the amount of like legitimacy that she also brought to Facebook, because
Hmm.
I remember she was one of the first few, senior, hires, so to speak, because obviously she worked heavily on Google's advertising business. She actually pulled a lot of Google's team, into Facebook's. But
Yeah.
I remember when she had joined Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, he still is very much a caricature, but back then he was like more of a caricature than he is now, right?
Also, that movie
So
had come
she,
out, so let's
yeah,
remember
Social
that
Network had
that
come out.
movie.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But she brought a lot of legitimacy to the business, and she, was kind of like the first adult in the building. So
Yeah.
there's no doubt to what she's contributed to Facebook. But obviously, I think, especially over the past couple of years, their like relationship has somewhere become a little, I don't want to say problematic, but I think I think it's almost it almost seems as if she's kind of playing to the tunes of what he needs her to play to, and that
Mm.
individuality that at least Sheryl Sandberg had, um 8 9 odd years ago, when she sort of came up with that whole lean in movement and this that and the other. A lot
Yeah.
of that kind of faded away in the past couple of years. But I mean, my TLDR is that this has been one long time coming, and second is, isn't it time for a change? I mean, hasn't it been too long of like Mark and Cheryl's reign?
I think also, if you look at it, and that's a great point, right? If you look at Google as a
Hmm.
comparison, I mean, Eric Schmidt did pretty much what Sheryl Sandberg did at Facebook, at Google. He handed it over, but I think the only difference here is that he took on CEO and then later gave it back to the founders. But they also decided to move on and kind of hand it over as well. I think every business reaches an operational level where founders tend to hand it over to someone else to run because it reaches that requirement.
Yeah.
Facebook somehow has evolved into, or rather, Meta has evolved into this very different beast where it's become more and more run by Zuckerberg. Then it
Hmm.
it went the opposite direction. Right? You normally would have it spread out a lot more. It's become a lot more centralized around him. Um, and also at some level, while the ad business and the data business got them where they are, that also I think is their biggest problem.
Achilles
Is
heel. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you talk to anybody today, especially after what Apple's done with the data part, what Google's doing as well, that business is suffering. Facebook as a platform, I don't know who goes on to Facebook anymore. I know the Facebook groups part still seems to be working, but I think the rest of Facebook doesn't seem to have as much might as maybe the ad engine, which isn't delivering as much results anymore. But I think for
Hmm.
Sheryl Sandberg, more than anything else, the last few years has been her having to kind of front face or just kind of work on all the problems they faced, right, from the Cambridge Analytica scandal to
Yeah.
there's even stories of how she used her influence to suppress some negative news about her boyfriend, um,
Ex-boyfriend. Yeah.
ex-boyfriend, sorry. And there's a bunch of stuff like that that happened around her. So uh, in many ways, it tarnishes what could have been a much stronger legacy if she
Yeah.
had left, like you said, about 5 years ago. And but now she kind of leaves, and you're kind of wondering that, okay, what? It's not as much about what will she do next, but it's more about why did she take so long to leave? Because she hasn't been, at her past her
She's not
peak
at the
in
top
what
of her
people consider.
game. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, 100%. I don't know, man. I think one big issue with Facebook, with the Meta group at large, has just been their total like lack of innovation. I think they've like outsourced a lot of their innovation through the purchases that they've made. Like Instagram was a
Or
great
stolen features.
acquisition. Yeah, exactly. Or stolen features. WhatsApp was a great acquisition. Snapchat could have been a great acquisition. They also haven't made too many acquisitions in the recent past. Yeah. Actually, if you think about it, nothing in the recent past has truly been as breakout as WhatsApp or Instagram. But I think long story short over here is, you know, at the end of the day, the guy who seems to be in command is Mark. So my question to you is,
Yeah.
do you think this is like beginning of the end? You know what I mean? Like Cheryl's
Mhm.
out. Up next will be Mark Zuckerberg, and
Yeah.
we both of us were listening to Pivot before this, and I think the one thing that came up in that episode was how Jeff Bezos sort of like
Mhm.
moving away, not sort of, you stepping down as CEO of Amazon has somehow made it like okay, acceptable, and cool for CEOs to depart without there being this furor about, oh my god, something must be wrong with the company, which is why the person's leaving. So do you think Mark's going to be next?
I think he will move. So I think the whole rebrand to Meta is a sign in a slightly different direction. I don't think he will. At some point, he's going to make someone else CEO for Facebook. It will be convenient or rather smarter for him to move to like a chairman-ish role on that front. But I feel he's going to really focus on the Meta and the metaverse part of it. So kind of put himself in the innovator seat and hand over operations to someone else. I
Hmm.
honestly feel that Adam Mosseri could be a interesting candidate to take over the Instagram CEO because he's, I mean, in many ways, a lot more likable. Has a public face out there. In many ways, many people kind of across Silicon Valley seem to believe that he's being groomed to take over that job. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't think Mark Zuckerberg wants to run Facebook. He wants to focus on Meta and where that's kind of going. And I think that's where he might go. He might not
Yeah.
move on and become Charakthin uncle like Jeff Bezos, but but I think this could be the way he'll go. He'll just go into the metaverse where he might just blend in very nicely.
Yes, caricature in Web3. I want to
Yes.
switch gears to, a company that I have a lot of respect for, which is Urban Company.
Mm.
Obviously, the reason why we're discussing Urban Company in the middle of all of this is because there's an article that we read recently about how Urban Company closed, I think, FY 21 with about 11.5 million orders and an average ticket price of 1100 to about 1200. And of course, they have seen their though they've seen their net loss widen, they've also seen their revenue go up. So their revenues, and all this has happened despite the 2 years of pandemic where literally people weren't allowing anyone to come into their house or come into their space, right?
Mm.
Especially in your top 8 to 9 cities, which is where Urban Company chooses to focus. I think they've had such an interesting journey. I remember interacting with the founders a lot when they had just launched. Or were toying around with their early idea back in 2014. What do you? But before we get into their numbers and their performance and this, that, and the other, what do you make of Urban Company? Are you a consumer? Do you like their brand?
I'm not a hardcore consumer. Honestly, I think in the past just called for a few services here and there. Never had a bad experience.
Hmm.
But I feel it's interesting to see how they've evolved, and how
Yeah.
they've kind of, in many ways, you see a lot of these businesses kind of come in at some point, try to become something else, and that has the problems that comes with it, right? But they haven't done that. They've actually kind of looked at scaling and evolving in the right directions, and that's it feels like one of those really solid companies to come out in the last decade or so, which doesn't get the limelight it maybe needs to, but and maybe that's a
Hmm.
good thing because they're really building a good business ground up in the best possible way. I mean, like, I didn't even know that they were in international markets till I
Hmm.
ran through the points on the article, right? And I think that also kind of shows that they're building a good business.
Yeah, I think, when analyzing Urban Company, one of their big sort of wins has been, so UC actually started out as a just style of sorts for
Yeah.
services. So it was supposed to be this like book
Plumber,
of like this
electrician, yeah.
exactly. And I think after they raised I remember they raised a giant Series A or Series B of like 20-30 million or some such thing, in which Axel had participated. I think it was with that round where you really saw them sort of, say that the way to problem solve in India is not through aggregation, but it's actually through ownership of the full stack of the supply chain, so to speak, right? So
Mm.
so for example, when an urban company a guy or lady shows up at your house, depending on what service you've ordered, they come as a representative of urban company, right? It's not like Pushpa or Vinod are turning up. You see
Pushpa.
yeah, jeez. But you know what I mean? Like you see, it comes branded as urban company, and I think that was one of the big like aha moments in their business, which I think gave them an ability to actually leapfrog into a standardized service provider versus what
Mm.
they were sort of doing earlier, which was just aggregation.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting how it's always the small things that go a long way, right? You've seen this happen across the board with, for example, Flipkart saying, you know what, we're not going to rely on third party delivery partners. We're going to build, this thing that's very proprietary to us in house. And you've actually seen the best companies do this, where they're very particular about ensuring that the thing that truly is their differentiator, which in urban companies' case is obviously the quality of the service, that
Mm.
has to strictly be controlled in house. So the kind of things that you've seen them make investments in have been in things like training of their staff, which is paramount, because if the staff isn't well trained, then everything else sort of comes falling down, like a stack of dominoes, right?
Yeah.
If people don't turn up in time, that again is one big sort of a red flag, which will lead to a poor customer experience and your consumer not coming back. And someone like me who ends up consuming UC often enough, I don't know, I think the biggest differentiator in my opinion about them has been they have never been bad, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they've been phenomenal, sometimes they've been cool, average. But I think it's so interesting how, like, just making sure that you don't screw up goes such a long way with consumers, because you know what I mean, like, you may not always have the world's best experience, but you never had a
Yeah.
bad, at least I've never had a bad experience.
Yeah.
And I think just that goes a long way, specifically in the services industry.
I think if you look at the pandemic, I think one of the businesses which really actually got it right during the pandemic in the best possible way was urban company, right? Because a lot of the
Hmm.
services that you would want to kind of suddenly transition to home. I know a lot of people who got like everything from like haircuts to everything else with the urban company, people kind of
Yeah.
coming in, and also that evolution they did to focus on also B2B and even selling products, right? If I read this right, they
Yep,
began to
yep, yep.
sell water purifiers at some point in time. It's all it's smart decisions. It's focusing on making sure the quality of service is good, and they also don't have any plans to go for an IPO, which seems refreshing considering everybody seems to have gone for an IPO. These guys like no, no plans yet. We're just focusing on uh, being profitable over the next few years. So all in all, shows that they're, I mean, it's the right kind of growth focus, and also like I think all the moves they made to add revenue streams are super smart. It just makes sense. It doesn't take you away
Yeah.
from your fundamental business.
Yeah, yeah, and I think one, so two things that I want to call out to what you just said. I think one other genius move was that B2B play, where,
Hmm.
for example, if Varun is a waxing lady on Urban Company, right?
Yes, I
You
am.
actually have to, yes, you are. You
My name
actually
is Pushpa.
Pushpa.
I am Pushpa.
Pushpa. Oh my God, this white noise on Think Fast isn't working out enough. No, but you actually have to buy all your products from Urban Company, if I'm not mistaken. So
Yeah.
their revenue stream is you not just buying a course where you learn how to become a beautician through Urban Company, but you also having to buy all of your products through Urban Company. So think of it almost as like Ola selling cars to prospective drivers. You know what I mean? Like that's how entrenched they are with their supply. And I think the second thing that I also really respect about them is, unlike a lot of other companies that have, we just spoke about Zomato's numbers, right? 60% of GOV coming from your top 8 cities. I don't think Urban Company has gone to like Bhatinda, you know what I mean? Or like,
Yeah.
picked up like a random corner of India and said, we will go to the next 100 cities. I think they're very clear about who their customer is, and they don't really deviate from the use cases that their customer has, which is just very refreshing to see. You know what I mean? like like
Yeah.
like no delusions about we are a tier 1 sec A plus consumer product, and as long as we keep making this customer happy, we're fine.
Yeah, I'm total fan of this business, and I feel in many ways this is a great example of just like what to follow in how you do it, no matter what business you're kind of in. Speaking of what to follow, have you been following what Dream 11's been up to in recent times? They're making some interesting moves.
Not at
Are you a
all.
Dream
So
11 user?
not even close. But batao, batao, all batao.
Is there anybody in the 11 you dream of? Sorry, bad joke.
Oh my God. Varun. I'm assuming you dream of all of the 11.
All of them.
Oh my
Ashish Nera is my
God.
favorite. Neraji has
Oh,
my heart for so long. But
remind me.
that
I'll
is
tell
more
you a fun fact about him
that is
after
more
we are done
IPL.
recording. Yes.
So yeah, so Dream 11 has been making some interesting moves. They've actually kind of put aside a large corpus to launch Dream Capital, where what they're actually
Uh-huh.
doing is that because of the whole action happening in the gaming space, they're looking to fund as many kind of companies in this space. So they're kind of almost like going against what VCs are trying to kind of invest into. Like they've invested in NFT platforms. They've done. I'm trying to pick a few other pieces here. They're looking at obviously Web3 is one focus that's going in, gaming is the other, and with all the action happening there, it seems to be an interesting way for them to not just build a sports and an esports focused business, but to kind of
Hmm.
double down and invest into other businesses which kind of become part of their ecosystem or might just kind of help them scale their own control over that space, right? So it's a very interesting move considering they also have like a large corpus with them. So what do you think of
Yeah.
this world domination plan of Dream 11?
I think more than world domination, the thing where, and we've discussed this before, but like where Dream 11 sits so precariously is they are like, I don't want to use the term borderline illegal, but you know what I mean? They're
Mm,
like, it's a very like fine line in between gambling, which is illegal, and esports, which is
yeah,
obviously legal but has its restrictions. So
yeah,
I think what they're doing is, and also the other big problem with MPL, Dream 11, and all these other guys is a heavy reliance on cricket, right? There's literally
mm,
no other sport that has caught on or contributes as much to usage as cricket. So
yeah,
I think more than anything else, this is like a sound strategy to not have all of your eggs in one bucket, just in case, God forbid,
mm,
some government official wakes up one day and says, "Sorry, guys, but this, just like cryptocurrency, is going to be regulated by ABC
yeah,
XYZ." And it takes like a some it takes a bout of bad press to suddenly have the government's eyes on you, right? I mean, you're seeing it happening in EV as well, where
yeah.
it takes like a bunch of Twitter
There was some issues in
escalations.
Karnataka, if I remember right, that happened
Yeah,
with
yeah,
them
we
as well.
discussed this in a past episode. There's this really good article in Rest of the World, which spoke about how a lot of like folks have gone bankrupt, have fallen into patterns of alcoholism, etc., because they've
Mm,
bet like their days earnings or their monthly's earnings on these esports platforms. So there has been a lot of that criticism, and it's exactly that, right? It takes one bad article to suddenly have like the eye of Sauron like staring down at
yeah,
you. So
yeah,
more
yeah.
than anything else, I think this is a good move for them to also have their own back and not
Mm.
have all of their eggs in one basket, just in case their fortunes change overnight.
I think also the spread of investments they're doing is smart. Just kind of name a few. Right, recently they invested into an NFT platform called it's a cricket focused NFT platform called Rario. They've obviously have they've also invested into the fitness marketplace, which is Fitter.
Hmm.
Elivar, which is a sporting apparel maker. So it's anything that's connected to sport in some form. I guess something has to be closely connected. But I mean, if I look at Fitter, it's not like it's like that closely connected to what Dream
Hmm.
Sports' larger plans are. But it's interesting they went there as well. Supposedly close to like they might have about close to 100 million to kind of put into startups across the board. Between 1 and 200 million is what the Ken article kind of calls out.
Yeah.
And they also have Fan Code, which is sports content streaming and e-commerce.
Hmm.
So it's a nice mix of things. What I guess what will kind of show is the fact that take away reliance from Dream 11, which is its obviously biggest with part of the
Backer.
business, which
Yeah.
and what you kind of spoke about, to kind of spread it wide so that something like this happens, then you kind of balance the whole thing out. But I guess the only other side of the question is that while they might invest into this, as it still depends on them investing into the right companies.
Yeah.
In many ways, you are seeing so many blowout platforms kind of coming out of this. Like Router is a great example of that. Of just like the way Router has really scaled in recent times is actually a great kind of case study to talk about. But
What is Router?
Router is this esports streaming platform. It started off as a sports online platform, and or for fans, and kind of pivoted towards a live streaming platform for esports.
How
Uh,
interesting. Or like a Twitch,
phenomenal,
basically.
yeah, phenomenal growth. They really
Hmm.
cracked a few things. They cracked tools for streamers, and they cracked monetization for them.
Hmm.
Raised a crazy amount of money recently. I was going to pick that up and try and find that number. But they're actually a great case study of someone pivoting towards esports and streaming and doing it really well. Um,
Hmm.
Super founder like Piyush is a great guy who's actually had to kind of go hop, skip, and jump, keep evolving the model till it kind of worked. And once it worked, it kind of just like rocket shipped over there. So you have examples like that happening. And yeah, they got invested by Krafton, which is the South Korean
Yeah.
company, if I remember right.
Gaming focus fund. Yeah.
So they invested
Company
into
and fund.
Router.
Yeah.
So lots happening there. And I guess for Dream Sports, it's going to be about as much as you might invest. Is this going to be the right investment or not? Is what will show.
Hmm.
But I think it's a smart move to kind of spread it this way.
Yeah, and it could be one of two things, right? It could be I don't know, either their existing model is so set in stone where you need to find new interesting problems to solve for, or for example, maybe one of their realizations has been that to actually win in this space, you need to be an ecosystem play and not a, you know what I mean, and not just
Yeah.
tackle like one part of the ecosystem and assume by just doing that you'll be able to get market share in the long run. So interesting moves, man. A nice story that
Yeah.
you found online.
And I'm not a gaming enthusiast at all, but I've always find this space to be super interesting. I love the business of streaming. It's become something I'm super intrigued by.
Hmm.
And there is so much happening there which we don't talk about enough. Maybe we should do pick up streaming in one of the next episodes. There's so
Yeah,
much
and
happening
get
in
an
that
expert
space.
on board and
Yes,
learn
we
from
haven't had an
them
expert in a
instead
while.
of,
Yes, we haven't had
yeah,
an
instead
expert
of
in a while.
having
We
us
said,
yoga and psycho babble or like
people like
white
us. I
noise
have an
babble.
expert. Not an expert
Oh
streamer,
my
but an
god, he's going to bring
expert
a
of
toy on,
everything.
guys.
Dwayne Johnson is back.
Jeez
Yes.
Louise.
He
Jeez
brings
Louise. And
everything
it's
to the table.
special, and he brings a break. He brings a break. He brings a
He
break.
brings a break. It's time to take a break, and we're right back after me and Dwayne have a side chat. Welcome back to Think Fast. Dwayne and I are done having a conversation. But what story are you talking about next, Suchita?
How sweet. Is that the only friend you have, Varun? Be honest, be honest.
He's my favorite friend.
He's your only friend, not favorite. It's him and the darwaza behind you. That's it.
So that
Those are
was
Varun's
yes,
two friends, guys.
that is true.
Varun talks to the door and he talks to an
Me and my
inanimate
mic.
object. Yes, but I want to get into another company that I find truly like. This is what I like about slow weeks. We guys can actually talk about things that we are genuinely interested in, like we did last week with that,
Yeah.
future of search article on A16Z. But guys, without further ado, the company we're going to talk about next is Country Delight, and we're not talking about them JLT, but they were in the news recently because they've recently raised about 108 $1 million again. One of
Wow.
the few companies managing to put together large sums of money. But again, similar to the urban company conversation that we had, I just think it's so important to also spotlight companies like Country Delight, who've again taken a very, very, very specific problem, which is ensuring Indian customers get fresh milk to their doorstep,
Hmm.
and built moat on moat on moat on top of that business. So before we get into telling you guys the length and breadth of Country Delight and what makes them interesting, are you a customer, Varun? I am not a customer of
I'm
Country
not.
Delight. I just find their model
I'm not a
very
customer
interesting.
either.
Is there
I'm not a
any
customer
feedback
either.
that you've got about them?
I've actually I've seen it around. I know some people who are consumers. I've never heard anyone complain.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact that people are kind of stuck on to, once you become a customer, I haven't seen anyone kind of change in a while. That's the only customer side perspective that I have. But
Hmm.
it seems like a very I wouldn't even say smartly run business. It's a very focused business, right? They've stuck to that essentials, that daily
Yeah.
essentials bandwagon, not jumped onto what is it? Your quick commerce, which everybody
Yeah.
else seems to have jumped onto with this part. And again, scaled it right, did D2C the right way, and yeah, now raising a shit ton of money.
Yeah, and just to run through their numbers, according to their annual financial statements with the ROC, the company's operating revenue surged 83% to 321 crores in FY21, up from 175 crores in the previous financial year. And they've also narrowed their losses from 68.5 CR in FY20 to 28.3 CR in FY21. So I think one, super interesting, point to sort of call out over here is when you stick to essentials. You just see, the power of compounding. And this obviously isn't a business that's been built overnight. They apparently started out in 2011, if I'm not mistaken, and they've really built their business like brick by brick, right? This is like a 11-year, 10-year success story in the making. And I think, to the point that you just made, milk again is one of those categories where once you've picked one provider, your switching cost is too high.
Yeah.
What would be tough for Country Delight to do potentially perhaps is get that first customer. But
Hmm.
the great thing about businesses like Country Delight, and even Urban Company for that matter, is if you are obsessed with one, for example, like one hairdresser, right? Or
Yeah.
if you're obsessed with one electrician because he just does all of your shit top to bottom, your switching cost becomes like super high. And this fundamental principle has obviously worked fairly well for Country Delight. You spoke about them not sort of falling into this trap of quick commerce and this, that, and the other. But if you look at fundamentally, the problem statement that they picked up on was a couple of things, right? Number one is Indian consumers generally care about freshness. I don't think Indian consumers give too many shits about traceability. But unlike the
Hmm.
West, right? Unlike America, where you'll buy a brand like Dairy Pure and the milk lasts for 10 to 15 days. In India, the penetration of these high shelf life milk products
Yeah.
um, apparently is less than 1%. So less than 1% of, like,
Because you don't want to
dairy
feel like you don't
products.
have a fresh product to give someone. I mean, milk is a great example, right?
Exactly.
You don't,
Yeah.
if anybody says the milk lasts longer than like a day or two, you're going to like really like be like suspect about how fresh that is. So that's very interesting insight.
Exactly. Exactly. And like everyone has tried, right? Everyone from Amul to Nestle to Danone have tried making this Tetra Pak milk, which is very common in the US and
Yeah.
also very common in China. They've tried to make this work, but you can't run away from this like obsession with just fresh milk, which is sort of like re-brought into the household every 1 to 2 days, depending on how often you, of course, consume milk. And I think the other big genius of Country Delight is, they've gone deep into problem solution, right? So I don't know if you remember this, but a couple of years ago, there were all these articles about how, certain brands, their milk is adulterated, and,
Hmm.
cows are being sort of like, shot up with steroids and this, that, and the other, and the
Yeah.
milk is not pure. So I think there were ripples of that movement, which would have obviously positively impacted adoption of Country Delight, because their promise basically is that they, not literally but like figuratively, they kill the middleman, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
they have their own farms. They source milk directly from these milk farms and this, that, and the other.
Aggregators. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and they deliver it straight to a consumer's doorstep. So I think there have been a lot of these like very interesting macro sort of, consumer, not trends but pain points of milk being adulterated, milk not being, remember in the middle there's this whole thing of XYZ brand isn't delivering cow milk,
Hmm.
they're actually delivering goat milk. And
Yeah,
do you remember, like, there were all those like random
I
Twitter
remember that. Yeah,
furors
yeah,
that were
yeah, yeah.
happening, which suddenly got consumers very like paranoid about where their milk was coming from. But long story short, I love
I
how
grew up
they
on buffalo
focused.
milk. I didn't like. I was actually. I realized that when that whole thing was happening because I.
Oh,
So
because you
when I
didn't
was
know
growing up,
which one was what.
yeah, no, I knew. I actually knew which buffalo was giving the milk because I
Acha.
come from a small town life. So like near home there was a couple of people who had these buffaloes. They would give us a milk every day. So I knew which buffalo's milk I drank every day. As weird as that might sound in today's world, and the
But to be
reason
fair,
why
same
because
here. Same
yeah
here.
because
Literally,
you
we
also
had like
knew like
buffaloes and cows
yeah.
in a farm close by, and that's where our home milk
Exactly.
came
And so
from.
you knew almost like face value, okay, this is where it's coming from. This seems to be the
Yeah,
environment. So you are fine with that. So doubling down on that versus we'll make the milk last longer or we will uh, you don't have to innovate in some cases. You just need to kind of
yeah,
focus on the basics. And I guess that's what they've really done. And I think some of the verticals they've added also super smart at adding bakery and fresh produce and stuff like that. So it's again been like nice add-ons of revenue streams, but I think the foundational
yeah.
part is still the milk.
Yeah, one fun fact, and then we can move on to the next story. Is they also, were like the butt of a lot of jokes because apparently, on the back of Country Delight packets, they have some version of made by IIM alumni because both of the co-founders are IIM alumni, and they were like the butt of a bunch of jokes. Because I remember some Aditi Mittal, that comedian, tweeted about how this is like IIM milking, that I went to IIM and putting it on the back of labels. So there've been a lot of like
As
these really
long as they're
funny
not
like.
part of IIM, what IITIIMshadi.com, if you know of that
Oh my
platform.
god, no, I don't know of that platform.
You don't
But
know
yeah,
about okay,
fun
one second.
fact, man.
We
Yeah,
got to
what
do a
is this?
fun segue. There was a platform that was called IITIIMshadi.com that came out recently. It's been about a month old story. Where basically for you to be on the Shadi platform, you have to have come from an like IIT or an IIM. I think the tagline was "Alumni Matters" or something like
Oh
that. So,
my god.
but best fact, founder went to SP Jain. Brand ambassador is Karan Johar. He didn't go to any IIT or IIM.
Oh
It does
my
not get
god.
fun than this.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a good segue. Is that where you found Pooja? Tell us. Be honest.
No, no. I weirdly enough, I have Chetan Bhagat to thank for me meeting Pooja. Yes,
What
went for a
is this
marketing conference.
absurd story?
Went for a marketing
Chetan
conference.
Bhagat.
Chetan Bhagat was talking on stage. I was very bored, looking around. She was bored. She was looking around. We just ended up having a conversation. That's how I met Pooja. Thanks to Chetan
Oh, so
Bhagat.
okay. Oh, so indirectly, because he was boring you. Got
Indirectly.
it, got it, got
Yes,
it.
yes, yes.
Last
Um,
story of the day.
last story of the day. Or do we take a break? Or no, we don't take a break before this story. We took a break. I am losing my mind right now. Guess who else is losing their spiel, which is Ola, everybody's favorite company to kind of shit on for, I guess, many of the right reasons because they really have been having a bad time in recent times. There's this article on the Morning Context about how Ola's fundamental cab business, which is obviously which is actually their business. I mean, they've gone to this whole
Hmm.
electrical scooter space, which has been chaos to say the least in recent months and over the last year. But what's really struggled and suffered is their cab business.
Yeah.
There's high attrition, there are supply constraints, there's complaints from consumers. All in all, it seems to be this business that's really breaking apart at a foundational level, which isn't good news considering Ola I remember the early days, there were times when I would choose an Ola over an Uber because I knew the Ola
Hmm.
quality of the cab and the service was so much better. But now we're looking at it from this lens. So, first reactions?
I mean, expected, no? Like
Hmm.
if Uber's core business in the US is like, I'm not saying it's shaky, but like it's definitely been impacted in between them cutting their subsidies. Like if you look at a lot of the conversation around Uber now internationally, it's oh my god, when did Uber get so expensive, right? So
Hmm.
uh, it's definitely expected, and also as much as I as much as it interests me in companies expanding out of their, core like operational purview, at some level it's also an indication of something must not be wrong, but something mustn't be fully right in their core business
Yeah.
for them to
Yeah.
want to have so many parallels that they're running simultaneously, right? Like, I remember Ola acquired Food Panda, ended up shutting it down. Then obviously there's Ola Dash. Um, Ola also, I think, in the middle still is, I don't know, doing a lot of like food delivery and the
Mm.
likes. Right now, they're trying to
Mm.
sort of
I
compete
don't
in
think they are
like quick
anymore.
commerce. And obviously, in the middle of all of this, they've got this like big sort of mess in their hands in the form of Ola EV.
Mm.
So I don't know, but like I think when a company starts, there's a big difference in between diversifying revenue streams and literally launching, totally new products that almost kind of have nothing to do with like the original thing that people were, using your app or your, platform or whatever else for. And I think, Ola's like weakening cab business. The bells were ringing a while ago.
Mm.
So this story doesn't surprise me. And also I think the pandemic would have really knocked the living daylights out of them.
Yeah.
And I think given Uber's lackluster performance on stock markets, I'm pretty sure them being able to raise money off of a cab booking business wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Hence their diversification into other things as well. But those are my 2 cents on this.
So even if you look at the article, right, like you mentioned, the pandemic, it wiped off nearly 30% of the cars from their system,
Hmm.
because how this model works is a lot of the it's the drivers who take the loans to buy themselves the cars, right? And you're giving about 30% odd, if not more, to the platform itself. And with petrol prices kind of going up on one end, secondly, having to kind of having loans to pay, it's been a bad business as a driver. I remember early on when Uber first came in, Ola kind of started off, drivers would talk about how they were making so much more. So on
Yeah.
average, somebody was making like 70 grand to like a lakh a month. But now with all of these costs kind of going up, that money has eroded down very quickly, and suddenly that 70 grand to a lakh has now gone down to like 30 grand in hand for someone who also has to pay a loan. And
Yeah.
that's really being the big struggle for drivers, which is why, I mean, there was this interesting tweet thread the other day on Twitter, where someone said that they actually asked the cab drivers, why do you keep asking for cash instead of doing the transaction on app? This thing, so they don't have to give that commission, and so then with the cash they can still hold a lot more of that money to themselves. But on the Ola front, the big problem also has been they've lost a lot of talent. I think this
Yeah.
focus towards the electronic bikes has suddenly taken away a lot of engineering talent. Supposedly, and this is, I mean, this is from the article, that a lot of people um, who were part of the engineering team have left, but there wasn't any documentation, so no one's got stuff to take over to understand the
What?
nuances of the platform. Yeah, that's what the article says. And so there is obviously a lot to unpack in terms of what's
Yeah.
happening to that business. They also like really need to get in money right now to kind of survive. The article says that they need an urgent infusion of about so last year they got a $500 million loan from which is sitting outside of India. And they've had a lot of high level people kind of quit and go. They don't have a chief technology officer. They haven't had a chief technology officer in 2 years. So all in
Jeez
all,
Louise.
it's a bad scene. And
Yeah.
it again shows that, and we spoke of a few good examples early on. This
Mhm.
is an example of not focusing on your core business. um, and I don't agree with anybody who says that because you want to innovate in a new direction, this happens. But you need
Hmm.
to have someone running. So if you had a CEO of the cab business, just separate from, this is why group structures exist. You
Yeah.
take a group structure where the cab business is one company, the electronic scooter one could be a different one. If the CEO wants to focus on that, you have someone running this, which isn't how this has been happening, and it seems to be full chaos.
I don't know, man. I think it goes back to that one big problem that happened back in 2012, 2013, right? Which was everyone wanted to be a technology company because you
Yeah,
had to say you were a technology company in order for you to raise money.
yeah,
And I think at the end of the
that's
day,
still a
you need to.
problem.
I don't know to what extent, because I think now hopefully investors have at least gotten smarter, and founders have gotten less delusional. Or at least I'm hoping they have over the past couple of months, but over the past couple of years, sorry. But um, uh, I don't know. I think at the core of this is like, at the end of the day, if you are a cab business, call it as it is, right?
Yeah.
If you are, a food delivery business, that basically means you need to be like operationally top notch. To totally juxtapose, if you're a beauty business, say you're a beauty business. Don't say I want to build the Instagram for beauty, like Glossier, for example, did. And there's nothing wrong with having like lofty ambitions, but I think this is where, there's a fine line in between having lofty ambitions and, not being very clear about what your TAM is, what your market is. These may be boring things to spend your time and money on, but just, being very clear about that goes a long way. So I think a lot of this is also coming from this obsession of every founder to want to be a technology business, even though actually at their core and operationally, technology, yes, 100% is a enabler for their business. But if you just look at the cabs business, and what, for example, like Meru's been able to do, right? Or how most cab companies operate. And again, to the point that you made, maybe them not having a CEO for this business is the biggest issue, which is no one's
Yeah.
really going back to the fundamentals of what the business needs to be or doesn't need to be. But all the best, Ola, all the best. I hope your EVs recover
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah. And for us to recover after telling all these amazing stories to all our listeners, because we are so cool. Yeah. क्या क्या story बताते हैं हम आजकल. We need to take a break and be right back with recommendations. Where I'll
Oh
think of my
my
next
God.
accent for this after break. Varun. Welcome back to Think Fast. Where अभी क्या recommendation है आपका मैडम? बताइए
Oh
बताइए क्या है
my
आपका
God.
recommendation?
Guys, I can't do this podcast anymore.
ओहो
This
क्या हो गया?
podcast.
मेरे हार्मोन
Oh
में
my
प्रॉब्लम चल रहा
God. Varun, I am so glad you don't have a job as a voiceover artist, because you would
I'm
suck
actually
at
learn.
that.
I'm learning to modulate voice. I want to become. I want to one day do voice acting for a living. So this is my practice. This podcast is my practice.
I am glad my years are coming to your help. But in any case, coming to recommendations, guys, I have a great podcast recommendations. I've finally gotten back to listening to business podcasts after a big lull in the middle. But Invest Like the Best is out with a phenomenal episode with none other than Ashwath Damodran,
Rangan.
who,
Oh yeah.
uh, hey, you're
Ashwat
just coming
Damato.
up with a random
I was
sounding
going to say
South Indian last
Rangan
name.
Chatterjee by mistake, but yeah,
Acha.
Ashwat Damodran. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, with Ashwath Damodran. It's a phenomenal episode, especially for those of you who aren't being able to make too much sense of where, the financial markets are at. Ashwath Damodran is a professor at NYU Stern, and he also has this really cool, website slash blog that you can check out. And he's given a lot of interviews. He actually gave this very good interview with the Cap Table, where he spoke about Paytm and the Indian IPO performance, this, that, and the other. But Ashwath Damodran generally is a guy who you should follow, but very specifically listen to this podcast. It helps make sense of a little bit of the craziness that's happening in the financial markets.
Yeah. I actually have a slightly weird but good recommendation. Like my recommendations always are. There's a playlist called Nature Stroll on Spotify. I've actually found it recently.
What?
It's super. Yeah, it's called Nature Stroll. It's basically, it's like nature sounds, but like there's music and stuff. It's really nice. It's like one of those really peaceful things you can listen to. I'm moving into this space of music a lot in recent times during the day. It's good to have play in the background, but Nature Stroll, give it a listen. It's great for a walk. It's great to just kind of play in the background. Um, it's peaceful. So check the playlist out. It's called Nature Stroll.
Lovely. And guys, last thing, if you guys have a topic that you want us to discuss, if you have feedback for us, if you have, something that you disagree with us on, please feel free to DM both Varun and or me and or IVM on Twitter or Instagram. Ask us questions. We'll take up listener questions, and you could get a
Yes.
shout out on Think Fast on the next episode.
Yes. And maybe we should put this part at the beginning of the episode for those people who don't last, because even if you don't last the entire episode and all my accents, you can still ask a question. So, dear producer, at the beginning of the episode as well, say Varun and Suchita are okay to take your questions, but we will choose if you want to answer or not.
That is correct. And on that note, toodles, my poodles.
Toodles.
Bye.
Bye, guys.